Hi, I'm Vicky Carter, and you're listening to the Let's Go Kick Ass Today podcast, Season 2, Episode 10. Every month, I interview inspirational people from the fields of music, adventure, and culture. And for the last episode of Season 2, I'm delighted to be joined by such an incredible guest lineup. During Series 2, I've moved 5 times, I've encountered a global pandemic, and still I'm surrounded by incredibly inspirational people, and I'm delighted to share their stories once again with you. In this episode, I chat to blues and soul singer and songwriter Acantha from New Orleans, based in London.
It's tough being independent and not having the big marketing budgets of major labels. Um, a team to do all the departments. Like basically, I'm doing everything myself. I do my own graphic design. I do my own editing. I do my own social media. I do like I'm the creative concepts, everything.
I also speak to journalist, broadcaster, podcast host, and documentary maker Lisa Francesca Nand.
So I was 29. I was thinking it's now or never. But a lot of people said to me, "Oh, you're very brave, leaving your well-paid job and going to do that." And I was like, I don't feel brave. I would have felt braver. The scary thing to me was staying.
And finally, I speak to video editor, videographer, and documentary maker Itte Hossain.
We define our characters based on what we do. And when you're not doing it, you lose that identity. So I think for me, that documentary was more therapy for me than anything else. I think I did it because I needed to do something that I felt I had an attachment to.
My first guest of this month's podcast is blues and soul singer-songwriter from New Orleans based in London, Acantha. I had the pleasure of seeing her perform at a live gig around about 2 years ago, and it was delightful to sit down and have a chat with her. She spoke to me about the birth of her career in Harlem in New York, being flown out to perform for Simon Cowell, moving to London, and what it's like making music as an independent artist. And you can hear from her new track as well, Whatever Happened to Our Love. She starts with telling me about how her upbringing, New Orleans, influenced her music.
Without me knowing it, it's a huge influence on my sound and who I am as an artist. Although I didn't find that out until much later on in my career. So growing up around marching bands and the sousaphone sounds and jazz and blues, and essentially the birthplace of all of this music. But I didn't find my voice in music, my interest in music didn't come alive until I moved away from New Orleans, unfortunately. When I moved to Harlem, to New York, in Harlem.
And what inspired you to make that move? I mean, also, once again, another incredible place for the birthplace of so many different artists as well. And to be surrounded by the energy, I think that you were performing 6 nights a week at the Box, quite infamous, nightclub. What was that like? How did that shape your career?
Yeah, so I moved to New York because I wanted to experience the big city. So the New Orleans, Louisiana is, to me it was like, oh, a little small town. I'm from here. I wanted to see something different. I wanted to go to the Big Apple. So I packed my bags, moved to New York. The classic story. Got dropped off in the middle of Queens, New York, and I was like, what is this place? And it was just this ball of energy. Fast forward, I found my way to a restaurant in Supper Club in Harlem, which my ex-boyfriend at the time owned, and I started singing the blues there, and that's kind of like the birth of my career as a singer. Then from there, there was someone in the audience. There was loads of people, like musicians and artists and booking agents that used to come there, and so I met this guy who was opening up. He was launching a magazine, and he was having his magazine release party at this newly opened nightclub downtown called the Box. And it wasn't officially open yet, but he wanted me to perform with my band at the opening party. Long story short, the owners saw me there. They offered me a job as the house singer. And then 7 or 8 years later, I was with the Box in New York, and then they opened one here in London. and I ended up being the house singer and also the first female MC of the nightclub. So that's how I ended up in London.
And I mean, how do they both compare? Because the box is in Soho, and I've never been there before, but I've looked into detail, and wow, it looks incredible. You know, you've got to have wonderful attire, and you've got to be arrived there at a certain time. It is a performance. So how does that compare the environment of Soho to Harlem? Because I think they're quite different atmospheres.
Very, very different. It was a nice change, you know. I felt so a friend of mine suggested, you know, because I was like doing the Harlem show for 2 or 3 years, and he was like, you got to go downtown, you got to go downtown, you know, you got to spread your wings, you know. So it just opened up a different just avenue of just a network of people in art and fashion and things like that. So yeah, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. Loads of celebrities used to come there, and so it was kind of weird being the entertainment for like A-list celebrities like Axl Rose and you know, J-Lo and Beyonce, and all of them used to come to the box to see us perform in our cabaret show.
Is there anyone who you were actually really nervous to perform in front of?
Who was I nervous to perform in front of? Actually, we did an event for a private event when Topshop was launching their New York store, and we got flown out to perform at Simon Cowell's 50th birthday party here in London. And he flew the entire, well, it was a surprise. Sir Philip Green or somebody was his best friend, and he flew all of us out to London. It was my first time in London. And we had to perform for Simon. He didn't know that we were performing for him. So that was pretty nerve-wracking, because I looked at the curtain and I saw like David Hasselhoff and the guy who used to do American Idol, who was his name? Ryan Seacrest, all kinds of, you know, Paul Abdul, they were all in the audience, you know. So that was pretty, you know, pretty intense.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, my jaw is like wide open right now. That's so cool.
Yeah.
And to have that glitzy lifestyle as well. I mean, how did you said that was the first time you were in London? What were your first initial reactions to London?
I loved it. I immediately loved it. I had this weird premonition that it was something about this place. I was like, I want to live here, you know, and I didn't know that it would be my home, you know, eventually become my home.
Do you feel that there's more opportunities for people in London than there is in New Orleans, or possibly even America?
I think it's all in, for me as a blues singer, soul singer, American blues soul singer in London, that is like
hold the front door.
Yeah. So I found my place here. Now I hear my UK friends, they go over to America, like actors and stuff, and they say they do better in America because of the accent and all that stuff. So, you know, you just got to find where you can thrive, you know. I think is what you have to offer, and find that community, and yeah, where you can kind of, you know, just kind of stand out and
play to your strengths.
That's right. That's
definitely.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And how has the last year been for you? I mean, you've released 3 singles, so pretty done well, but also lockdown, like mentally. I saw that you were doing live sessions, covering some great classics and uploading them. And I did remember I actually tuned into one of your live sessions as well. What's it been like covering those classics?
Oh, it's given me, I always say I started that series to kind of like stay sane because without live music and, you know, pre-COVID, I was performing, you know, 5 or 6 nights a week, you know, or, you know, 2 shows a night sometimes. And without that for a year, I needed to do something quick, fast, and in a hurry to kind of keep my voice warm and also, you know, provide some entertainment for people as well. So it was a thing that was born out of just the love of my craft and just wanted to continue to sing. So I set up shop in my living room, and it's been received very well. I think I'm 43 episodes in, and I've covered everyone from Nina Simone to, you know, Al Green to Aretha Franklin, Etta James, all of the soul greats, and I call it standing on the shoulders of. And it's been wonderful paying tribute to the soul legends who paved the way, because they really have. And yeah,
renowned around the world.
Yeah, right. And I think it's important that for me, it's, you know, to keep that legacy, to keep those artists fresh, you know, in the mind of, you know, and introduce them to maybe even the millennials or something.
Yeah, different generations, 100%. So they can be astounded by the, you know, the classic talent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, stand on those shoulders, pave the future. That's also, well, I'm blown away by how many times you sing on a regular basis. Like, how do you keep your vocal cords in shape?
I have to admit, I'm not big on vocal warm-ups, like, you know, the I tried to do that. It's so, oh God, it's so boring. Anyway, that's horrible. But I always tell myself, like, I'm a blues soul singer. I needed a little bit raspy and rough, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Fits with your branding, yeah.
Yeah, keep with my branding. So yeah, I just try to just sing, you know, I sing to myself and, you know, in the bathroom or whatever. Sing along to the radio, sing along, you know, in the studio. Yeah.
There we go. Wow. You mentioned Nina Simone there and many other classics, and you've actually at Blues Kitchen before, like, performed a catalogue of her songs, which I think is magical. What was that like?
I've done 3 tributes to Nina. The Blues Kitchen have entrusted me with telling the story of Nina Simone 3 times, and each show is just, I mean, digging into her catalog. We only have 2 1-hour sets, you know, and that's nothing. Her catalog is just so, you know, it's a lot of stuff. So we had to kind of like cherry pick how we can kind of tell the story of Nina and give different, because she was like, she sang jazz, she sang gospel, she sang blues, she sang so many types of songs. So we it's just incredible, and those nights channeling Nina and what she stood for, it's just you said it right, it's magical. I've read her books, I've seen her documentary, you know, just absorbed. I admire what her approach to music and how she tells a story and her patience in singing. And it's all about tone and timing. And she's really in it. Like I don't know if you saw this one documentary or show where she steps out on stage and she just looks at the audience. She doesn't say anything. I mean, it's something. Every time I see it, I'm like, oh my God, I wish I was in the audience, because it's like you're transfixed. And so yeah, I've learned so much of, you know, from watching her and also performing her material, for sure. And the audiences have been, those shows attract diehard Nina Simone fans. So, you know, when you're in the house at the Story of Nina Simone, when it's sold out, you know, you got an audience ready for Nina. Now that's pressure, because they're expecting, you know, how do I find my voice singing Nina? And that is the challenge each time. But I've received standing ovations every time, so it's all good.
Of course you have. I wouldn't be surprised, you know.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm like that with Tina Turner. I idolize Tina. Yeah.
Do you do Tina when she was with Ike, or Tina 80s Tina, or both?
I like both. Yeah. My mum and I have seen the play 2 times. We're going to say it the 3rd time, and we saw her last performance at the O2 as well. I know, so blessed for that.
Was she like, was she still giving it?
On fire. Oh my gosh.
Oh
Her
my
thighs
God.
were incredible. The energy she brought, you know, the costume changes. I just thought, she's sorry, it's just like you and Nina Simone. I'm just rambling on about how much I love
Tell me
her.
this. How many times did you do the Proud Mary dance, though?
All the time, you know, all the time. My go-to for karaoke is What's Love Got to Do with It. That's my tune. Yeah.
I did an acoustic version. I think it's like a minute or 30 seconds or something. It's on of What's Love Got to Do with It. But did you see it?
Yeah, it's beautiful. So you released 3 singles, incredible. So firstly, I'd love to chat about, so He Said, She Said. Gosh, let me get that right. That could be a tongue twister.
It can be, yeah. He said, the guy who did my live video, he could never say, he was like, you know, we're going to produce it, you know, I think we should do this, but he said, she said. He could never.
Okay, at least I'm not the only one.
Yeah. He said, she said.
Yes, thank you. So you recorded that before lockdown. So you've been sitting on it for quite some time.
Right.
What has that been like?
Well, it took some time for us to kind of for me to, you know, it's a process. People consume music so fast, right? So it's like a 2, 3, 4 minute song. But they don't understand that to put that song together, it takes so much time and money, and you just consume it like that, you know, one song. So we recorded it in seven tracks in February of 2019. And then I had to do the horns, and you do the mixing and mastering. So there's so many steps to get it to the level of release. So we were doing all that, and then COVID hit. And so therefore all the work stopped, and I just said, you know what, I'm just gonna try to use this time to kind of get my affairs in order, you know, get my branding website and all that. And then I was like, I don't know when this thing is going to end, and I can't hold out. I have to do something. So I said, you know what, I'm going to launch myself as an artist in the middle of a pandemic and see what happens.
Amazing.
So I did that in October 2020. I came out as an artist and came out with He Said, She Said, this funk tune.
What a song. It's got so much fire, so much energy, and like you've said, it's got loads of levels and loads of layers with the live music, especially how it ends at the end. You know, I can actually imagine it to be a live, like, theatre performance kind of thing, you know, or you know, just because of the dramatic ending, you just suddenly the curtain drops or something like that, you know. That's what it feels like. So, yeah. Fabulous. Well, you know, in the future they're going to be making a play about your life story, so that could feature you in it. And then I loved your second one as well. So it's dedicated to your mum, Lois Lang, in February. I think that's so wonderful, highlighting, you know, she's got no Superman. Tell me about that, why you wanted to create a song for her, because actually I understand that she only recently has ever seen you perform live, so she's quite new to the idea, or even seeing you perform.
Seeing me perform live, like in full kind of artist mode. She saw a couple of shows like way back when I was like not even close, you know. It's just like, Mom, come see me perform down at the, you know, the local whatever. But this was like, I flew her to London in I think 2018. She came to my first show at Pizza Express in Soho, and she was sitting in the front row, and I just had the song. We had written the song, my partner and I, who was also the guitarist, and we had to perform it for the first time in front of my mom. So that was no pressure. You can actually see that on YouTube. But yeah, it was, I just decided, you know what, to follow up with her, a song about my mom, which was dear to my heart, because, you know, I'm an independent artist. And instead of going with like strategy of like, what will the streaming platforms want to play, or what will be on radio, I said, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to release this song so my mom could actually hear it. You know, you never know with parents, you know, in life, you know, you just want to give them their flowers while they're here, right? And I'm so happy I released it. You know, people who hear it, you know, I've gotten some great lovely feedback from it, you know, and a lot of people say that it helps them, it makes them remember the love that they have for their mom. So that's nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I think that's so fitting in a pandemic as well, to say, you know, I'm going to give something back to my mum. She gave so much to me, you know, supported me. And it is a beautiful song. And I think it also highlights, you know, your different styles and your different tones as well.
That was also a thing, you know, you came up with this fiery funk tune, and then I just want to show another side to my songwriting and to me as an artist.
Definitely does that. And then your most recent one as well, Whatever Happened to Our Love, that's so exciting. So tell me more about that and the inspiration behind that.
So this song actually was a kind of like I rejigged it. So I wrote the original version of that song, was written while I was in New York City. The guy that I was seeing at the time with the Harlem restaurant, who I performed at the restaurant, that relationship ended, and it was a hot mess, and I was so heartbroken at the time. You know, you think, woe is me. So I got with this producer who actually is he's a Grammy Award-winning producer who worked with Duran Duran and Madonna and all these people. And he invited me down to his studio in the basement of his apartment in upstate New York. And I remember getting on the train, and I was just like not in a good place. And then we went down there, wrote this song, and it kind of was like a doo-wop feel, a very sad and slow, like, whatever happened to our love, you know, woe is me kind of thing. fast forward, I never did anything with it because I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life and blah blah blah. And I decided to just rejig it. And my boyfriend, who's a guitarist who I mentioned, who also wrote He Said She Said and Lois Lane, decided to put like a funk vibe to it. And I just did a little rewrite on the lyrics so it wasn't so sad and kind of made it upbeat. And that's my third single, Whatever Happened to Our Love, which is out.
I mean, that's so exciting, working on these ideas and these songs and then keeping them and reworking them. Like, that's a skill in itself to know when to release it as well. And as you highlighted before about choosing what songs, do I go for the streaming or do I go for something that's more personal for me? I mean, how challenging is it for an independent artist to make those decisions and to think, okay, you know, what am I going to prioritize?
It's tough being independent and not having the big marketing budgets of major labels, you know, a team to do all the departments. Like, basically I'm doing everything myself. I do my own graphic design, I do my own editing, I do my own social media, I do, like, you know, I'm the creative concepts, everything, you know, with the help of, you know, a very small, you know, mentors here and there. I have to remember to always stay true to myself. I think that's the most important thing, is what do I want to do? What will make me feel good? I love the music that I'm making. And I feel like, you know, as long as I'm honest to myself and I feel good about it, then, you know, you kind of look at the big picture and say, well, how do I feel at this moment? What do I want to say to the world? And then, you know, you put a little bit of, you know, you have to have like a marketing plan and all that. But you know, you figure out what you want to do, and then you wrap a little marketing plan around it and figure out how you're going to get it to people, because people do have to hear it. It is a business. I do understand that. But creatively, I try to always look within and move from that space.
That's really powerful. I think, you know, that's so inspirational. And I hope people listen and take that away and stay true to their authentic selves and their music.
I think that's the most important thing. I think nowadays with this social media facade highlight real world we live in, you know, it's, you know, you gotta find yourself. Otherwise you'll get lost chasing other people's, you know, false, you know,
highlights,
right?
Not real.
Which is not real. So you got to get real with yourself.
And you put those good vibes out in the universe, and the universe has listened. You've been on Radio 2 music, you know, Jazz FM, talking about your music as well. Things are really picking up, and you've obviously got a gig as well coming up at Jazz Cafe. How are you feeling about it all?
I'm feeling really, really excited, and you know, it's a dream come true. I'm living in the dream to finally have recorded music out, and that people are actually like digging it. You know, that's awesome. You know, to actually have some radio action going on as an independent. These are all big, huge wins. And you know, I have to remind myself when I get a little bit frustrated about, you know, which is human. You know, it's a human thing. You know, you always want, like, you're always looking ahead, like, oh, I wish I had that. When, you know, a year ago, if I could fast forward and see myself now, I'd be like, oh my God, you're on Jazz FM, you're on this, you know. So I'm trying to live in the moment and celebrate these wins along the way. But I feel very excited about, yeah, the whole journey.
And what a journey Acantha has already been on. Make sure to follow her on socials and check out her upcoming gig next month at Jazz Cafe. Here is her new single, just a little snippet of it, What Happened to Our Love.
You used to hold me like that. You used to touch me like that, baby. And I want it all back. Yeah, baby. Makes me wonder, whatever happened to our love? Oh, yeah.
My next guest is journalist, broadcaster, podcast host of the Big Travel podcast and documentary maker Lisa Francesca Nand. She tells me about how she made the change from events to journalism at the age of 29, how she became the first female presenter at TalkSport, how her travel journalism career took off, her powerful and moving documentary about her own experiences of miscarriage, and we chat the Big Travel podcast and how that's opened more doors for her in the podcast world. She starts by telling me what it's like growing up in the south of Spain.
I don't want to show off. We didn't have, on the downside, we didn't have a lot of money, and we were shut off from popular culture. That sounds ridiculous because we were in the Andalusia. So we were shut off from, as a child, you know, I wanted like all the UK culture. I wanted to know what was in the charts, and we got it months and months late, and, you know, didn't have all the latest clothes or the chocolate bars. But it was, which is what's important when you're a child. It was an absolute magical upbringing. It really was. You know, we virtually cast aside our shoes and sort of stayed barefoot for the whole time. That's a complete metaphor. There was a lot of shoe wearing, but we did go to the beach and the pool and spent weekends camping in Tarifa on the wild Atlantic coast amid the sand dunes. And we were at an English school, myself and my older brother. And we had a real community there. It was really, I look back and we had so much freedom and so much sunshine. It was really lovely.
And that relationship with nature as well, obviously that stemmed to where you are now in Brighton and all your explorations and travels. How do you feel, as I just quickly mentioned there, my dad lived in Marbella for about 10, 12 years. How do you feel perception has changed of Marbella and Malaga and Costa del Sol in the last 10 or 20 years?
That's a very, very good question. And actually, it's something I've talked about quite a lot. I even wrote an article for the National Geographic Traveller about my part of town. See, I don't really hang around in Marbella. That's always been a bit too glitzy for me. I say glitzy, but it's got its you know, it's non-glitzy side as well. So my part of the Costa del Sol is very much Fuengirola, which when I was a child, it was a small town and didn't have, it had a certain amount of development, but that sort of development got quite out of hand in the 90s and 2000s. But about, say, 15 years ago, they realized that actually this isn't doing us any good, this sort of like reputation for fish and chips and fried breakfast and Brits abroad. And the local government made a real effort to change things. And in the last, say, 10 years, it's actually become a place that I'm once again proud of to be from, because there was a while back where I was a bit like, oh yeah, I'm from, you know, Fuengirola, yeah, it's Costa del Sol, embarrassing. And but it's beautiful now. It's really beautiful. They've paved over in a nice way, pedestrianized lots of tiny little back streets which before were just clogged with traffic and parking, and now in the center of Fuengirola they're all covered with tapas bars, and the renewed interest in the Spanish people of embracing their own culture. That culture has always been there, of course, in the Costa del Sol and the Andalusia, you know, Malaga, Seville, Granada, all of those cities have always been very Spanish. But on the coast, that kind of got forgotten for a little while as everyone started to cater for tourists and join in with that. But now there's been a real resurgence in the last 15 years of fantastic Spanish culture, and it's lovely, you know, the food and the culture and the people and the warmth. It's just really nice.
That's so nice to hear, because, you know, people, when they want to go on holiday, obviously there is a group of people who want to get their fish and chips when they go on holiday, but also people want to be whisked away in the country and what it's known for, and have those wonderful tapas bars. Oh gosh, I'd cut off my toe to go there right now.
Honestly, this job is terrible. I was just on Talk Radio half an hour before I spoke to you, and in the end I was like, I'm making myself cry here, you know, just talking about going places. By the time we're allowed to go abroad again, we will have been, the travel ban this time will have been in effect for 19 weeks. And, you know, obviously not many people went ahead with travel in the earlier part of the year, although I did in 2020 in the summer, managed to get away. Yeah, it's, I miss it so much, you know, just that freedom. I'd love a day out in Eastbourne right now, though, anywhere where the pubs and cafes and restaurants were open and there were people walking around and different places to explore.
And so you've moved to Brighton, and you regularly also spend time in Spain as well. How does that work out? Because you're living the dream there, you know, you're right by the coast in such it's friendly environment, which, you know, is fantastic, and the arts, and then Spain as well, which you can always go for guaranteed sunshine.
I've been really lucky in the places that I've chosen to live, but obviously I have chosen to live there, but I haven't been sort of taken away somewhere I don't like, you know, by work or anything like that. So I did, when I was 16, I left Spain and I moved to be in Brighton. So I was here before London, and I lived here for a long time. And then I moved to Brighton, to London. Well, actually my husband and I, we did on and off London, Brighton. So after about 10 years together, we said, oh, we need to be in London more, and we did a 50% of the time in Brighton. We had a place there, 50% of the time in London for work, Brighton on weekends. But when our first child was born, we thought, well, actually, we should stay in one place, and we sold up in Brighton and just moved to London. So the plan was always to come back to Brighton. So we did a constant about a 9-year stretch in London, and I haven't moved from London because I don't like it. I love London, absolutely love London, and I miss it now. But I absolutely love Brighton as well. And they're both, like you said, they're both very cool places. Lots of culture, history, art, music, dance, media, all of the things that I love. But here we've got added sea, which is a real bonus.
Definitely. And that fresh air as well. I went for a run this morning and it was just the smog of London. It's going into my lungs, which isn't ideal in a pandemic. So looking at your career, tell me about, bizarrely, strangely, so you did a postgrad when you were 29 in journalism, and that's exactly what I'm doing now. I've decided to do an NCTJ qualification and I'm 29. So what was it like taking that leap from events to journalism? Because I think I've heard that you had quite a mixed reaction from doing that.
I did have a mixed reaction. A lot of people said, oh, you're very brave, leaving. I had a really well-paid job, probably one of the most well-paid jobs I've had. Now I've gone into journalism, and I was 29, but I always felt I'd missed my calling. I was on stage as a child. I developed an underactive thyroid gland when I was 20, and that had a big a knock-on effect on my confidence levels, and I put on weight, and I stopped performing and doing things and became a bit anxious about. I always wanted to be a presenter, actually. At the time, I wanted to be an MTV presenter. That would have been my ideal, because music was my total passion, and MTV was, presenting. It was a big thing at the time. You had all the sort of well-known, Edith Bowman and Gail Porter and Kat Deely, and everyone became these sort of big, great presenters. And I'd love to have done that, but I failed miserably. I got an audition, and I was just so nervous. I just couldn't even speak, and it was so frustrating because I'd gone from this confident person, who was had managed to become a natural at performing because I'd exposed myself to it so much, to being this incredibly nervous and anxious person having panic attacks. And so I fell into events. I had this great job traveling the world, spent 3 months in Bangkok, went to New York, went to like really cool places, and working on the Brits and the BAFTAs, some really good events as well. But I felt like I'd missed my calling. So I was 29. I was thinking it's now or never. And I chose to go back and do a post-grad. And I was sort of tossing up between doing acting, and then I saw this broadcast journalism course, and I chose that. But a lot of people said to me, oh, you're very brave, leaving your well-paid job and going to do that. And I was like, I don't feel brave. I would have felt braver. The scary thing to me was staying. The scary thing to me was not going and choosing to do this course. The scary thing was staying. And what I wanted to do was expose myself to performing over and over and over again, and get rid of that anxiety, because the more you do something, the better you get at it, the more comfortable you are. It's the only way to get over it, I think. And also I suspected, and rightly so, that actually having that official qualification would open more doors.
I'm sorry to hear about the personal experiences you had with the panic attacks. That sounds really difficult, but also eventually it led you to where you are now, which is fantastic. And all that experience and obviously connections with music as well and events must have come in handy now. That's so weird that you're saying all of this. I feel I'm going to go off on a tangent now, but I feel like the universe works in mysterious ways, and having this chat with you right now is just so inspiring on so many levels. So thank you so much. So you're presenting with the BBC, and then you became the first female presenter at TalkSport. I mean, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. I think I managed to climb the career ladder relatively quickly, because by that point I was 29, 30 when I graduated with my postgrad in broadcast journalism. So I kind of like done the world of work already to a certain extent. You've got, a bit like where you are now, you've got a lot of experience, but still plenty more to learn. And so that sort of put me in a good stead for getting jobs. So I did manage to get a job at the BBC. I was I was presenting my own show, music show, on the weekends, and reporting and news reading for BBC Southern Counties in Brighton. And also, at the same time, I was doing the travel news via a centralised company called Traffic Link that did travel news for lots of different radio stations. So one of the radio stations I was responsible for was Talk Sport, and I got on really well with the people whose show I was on, Hawksby and Jacobs. Really, really lovely, funny men. The best show on that station, on any station in many ways. Really, still going now. And because I was getting on well with them, I was a bit cheeky, and I emailed the program director, the editor of the station, the guy in charge, and said, if you've got any work coming up, could you please think of me? And he said, actually, I've got something in mind. So I went to see him, and within a month, I was co-presenting the afternoon show, the mid-morning show, as a sidekick more than a co-presenter, with a presenter who's on talk radio now, actually, called Ian Collins. It was really, really good fun for those few weeks I was co-presenting the daytime show. However, something happened to shuffle things up dramatically, as it often does in radio. Within a few weeks' time, Ian and I were doing the overnight show. Now, the overnight show was wonderful in the way that it was 5 hours of live talk radio to fill every night. And it was a really, really great way of cutting my teeth on national radio and getting to do a lot of talking. But it's not very good for your life in many ways to sort of be working, to be on air from 1 a.m. till 6 a.m., although we got a lot of listeners. And after about a year and a half, it got too much. So I very accidentally fell into travel journalism. I was very lucky to fall into travel journalism after that. But I've still got a great relationship with the people at Talk Sport and Talk Radio. The producers that I worked with back then are all like, in big top jobs now. And like I said, I was on Talk Radio just half an hour before we spoke. I'm on there regularly chatting about travel, which became my next part of my job.
Yeah, that's crazy. 5 hours of live radio through that time period as well. It's kind of like the period where you get the insomniacs, the night shift workers. You might get yourself a bit loopy as well because you're on a different type of time zone. And then also just the freedom to be able to chat and just vibe off each other as well. That must have been so interesting, all that energy. Yeah, I think a year and a half, well done. I tap my hat off to you.
You're right, though. It's a very astute way of thinking of it. It was, the show itself was a really good way because we could do anything we liked. There was no one sort of saying you had to, apart from the news on the hour, possibly even half an hour at that time of night. But apart from that, we could do anything we want, and it was really good. We did sort of vibe off each other, and Ian and I were we were politically quite different and had quite different opinions in a lot of ways, but we'd talk and talk and talk. And he'd lived in southeast London as well, near me, so he'd drop me off and pick me up every night. And in the car on the way there, I'd be talking. In the car way back, even after we'd just done 5 hours of live radio, we'd just be talking non-stop. It was a definitely really good vibe that we had together, but we didn't agree on most things, as well.
That works in radio, definitely. You have to disagree with each other and at least, have that open conversation, and it makes more interesting radio. So you mentioned travel journalism. So as you highlighted, the National Geographic, the Telegraph, you've written articles for them, Huffington Post as well, but also you've contributed to Talk Radio, LBC, Sky News. I think Good Morning Britain this morning, yeah.
I was on with Phil and Holly. That was fun.
Crazy. And BBC Radio 2, Rip Off Britain, the list goes on. What was it like making that transition? Because that's a pretty much dream role. And do you feel that you have to be a specialist for people to come to you and say, okay, we're gonna chat to Lisa for a travel update?
Well, I am a specialist now, and I think you do have to be a specialist. And luckily, before and during my Talk Sport days, I travelled an awful lot. So I travelled with my event job, lived in several countries around the world. I grew up in Spain, of course, so that's already a place of travel. And then I accidentally fell into travel writing while I was still at Talk Sport. The only person that people often think of for travel is Simon Calder, and he was our regular guest, travel editor of The Independent, as he then was. I think he's just Simon Calder now, isn't he? So big. But I managed to get an article published with them in The Independent. I was going on holiday to Cuba and wrote it up for them. And then having that one article sort of just, often it depends, for people that sort of that are struggling to get their foot into the media, often it depends on one thing. I had an article that I could link to. I'm published in The Independent. Can I write for you? And that sort of helped me get more work. And got this really, really cushy job for Sky.com. Sky at the time had a travel channel, Sky Travel, and therefore they had a travel section on the website. And I got commissioned to do a regular two articles a month, 2 articles and videos. So I do present travel videos and do 2 articles a month and get paid decent money, actually, looking back, and be able to go on any single press trip in the world I wanted to, because how travel journalism works, and a lot of things work, is you have to have a confirmed commission to go on, the Telegraph or so a tourist board or a posh hotel, as it often is, will say, we want travel journalists to come for a week in the Maldives. And you say, yes, I'd love to come. And they say, have you got a confirmed commission? And you say, yes, I'm writing for the Telegraph or whatever. And here's the proof of it. They don't just let anyone go along. So via Sky, I had a confirmed commission for every single trip I wanted to take. So I had this really cushy couple of years that I was getting paid and could go on any single press trip I chose. And I was specializing in luxury travel. So it was good. I can't lie. It was a really good job. And of course, I published things for other people while I was there, making those travel videos, for the Telegraph and other publications.
Oh, that's incredible. That is the dream. That's wonderful. Luxury travel as well. You're going to have all the special chocolates on the pillows and the fine dining.
Well, they really look after you, because they want travel writing is very partial. It's not impartial at all. It's very partial because they want you to have a good time and write good stuff about them. So yeah, we were treated just incredibly. And sometimes I go along with my then boyfriend, who became my husband. Sometimes I'd take a friend to a spa or a weekend in Dublin or whatever. And other times it'd just be going with fellow journalists. And that was just like a massive luxury school trip, where everyone goes out and gets drunk, but you're getting drunk in the Taj Hotel in Bangalore, and all end up dancing on the bar, and just like absolute mayhem, everyone being let loose, and so a bunch of strangers, sort of social lubricating everything with a bit of alcohol, and in these just gorgeous hotels all over the world.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And so not only you've created videos for Sky, but you've also created your own documentary, and I hope this is okay for me to chat about. Yeah, and it was called First Heartbeat, and it was stemmed over 5 years. You personally documented your own experiences, and your husband did as well, of the various miscarriages you had. What was it like personally documenting, those such raw, authentic moments over 5 years, and then also afterwards sharing it with the world, on the Daily Mail, Women's Hour, Loose Woman, like those personal moments? Because I think you said in your Loose Woman interview, I didn't expect to be sharing it with the world.
You've done your research. I'm really impressed, actually. I think you're the person who knows more about me than my family right now. So Sky Travel closed down, which sort of was fine by me because I was still doing stuff for the other press, but it did coincide with a period. I'd just gone back from this I got married and just got back from this really good trip to Fiji, Australia, Thailand, other places. And I found out I was pregnant. And that was one thing we wanted, so we were very excited. And it was just a couple of days before my 12-week scan that I began to get like these really horrible pains. And and when you see miscarriages on TV and in movies, you don't really get a sense of the pain and how long and drawn out they can be. Just someone sort of has a bit of pain and takes their bed, and then they're really sad the next day, but it can go on a lot longer. And I was in agony and obviously incredibly upset. But actually it had been my 3rd miscarriage, so I'd sort of brushed the other 2 off, because I hadn't wanted children at that time. But then at that point it was like, okay, this is really serious. I've had 3 miscarriages. And as a journalist, I started to sort of dive headlong into my own research. And I realized there wasn't that much support out there, either emotionally, because people don't talk about those first 12 weeks in pregnancy. So how can they be sympathetic or understanding when you've lost a baby that they didn't really know you were carrying? Such a big deal to you. When you get pregnant, your life has already changed. If you've got a wanted baby, you're already imagining what it will look like, what it will sound like. Will it have your eyes? Whose toes will it have? All of those things you're mentally planning. Even though miscarriage, it's a thing, because we don't hear about it that much, although we do hear about it more, you don't really expect it will happen to you. So it was a big shock. And because of the lack of support, I started to film, because I was filming everything at the time anyway. it's a bit like other people would start to blog or write. Because I was doing so many travel films, I just picked up my camera and started to document my journey, thinking, well, if I can in any way help someone else going through this, you know, and see that there's a pathway and other people do go through it, then that would be a really good thing. But eventually I managed to sell it as a documentary to the Discovery Channel, TLC in the UK, and Discovery bought it, and it went around the world to many countries. I'd only know it was being played around the world because I'd suddenly get a flurry of contacts from Brazil or Argentina about people, you know, wanting to know my story and wanting help with theirs.
That's amazing. That's incredible that you're making a difference with so many people in their lives, you know, through your own experiences. So that leads me to my next question, you know, the Big Travel podcast. That's fantastic. You've got over 100 episodes, you know, listened in over 130 countries. It's known now, you know, this is the travel podcast they listen to, and you've interviewed an array of, you know, BBC correspondents, sports stars, drum and bass DJs, adventurers. You know, it's incredible. So what inspired you to launch that podcast, and also what do you love about the medium podcast?
I kept on hearing about podcasting, and so I started the Big Travel podcast 3 years ago, so February 2018. And I kept on hearing about it, and I was listening to a few, but not really, you know, I was sort of dipping my toe in, and I just thought it just felt like the thing that made perfect sense for me. I'm already a radio presenter. I've already got all the skills, and I'm a travel expert on TV and radio at that point, and a travel writer. It's going really well. It's in the top 1.5% of globally downloaded podcasts, according to the stats. Like you said, we're on episode 116 right now. I've had some really well-known people on, and also it's acted as a shop window. I don't always get paid to do the Big Travel podcast. I did have a sponsor for several months, but it was a travel-related one, and they've gone off. I'd accept one, but I'm not actively seeking one, because there's something quite nice in not having the sponsorship, although obviously I need the money. But it's acted as a shop window to help me produce podcasts for other people. And indeed, John Simpson, so the BBC Foreign Affairs editor, John Simpson, came on, and he loved the process so much that he said, let's make a podcast. So we did 6 episodes together, the two of us in the studio. And then from there, I do a podcast for India Hicks, who's the granddaughter of Lord Mountbatten, and her mum, Lady Pamela Hicks, who's the daughter of Lord Mountbatten. And that's in the top 0.5% of globally downloaded podcasts. So it's acted as a shop window, you know, as it were. And I just really love it. I've realized that what I really love is talking to people. I love doing this. I'm usually on the other side, the interviewing, but interviewing these days, because of podcasting and you've got a certain amount of liberty, it's a two-way process, isn't it? It's a conversation a lot of the time, as well as an interview. So yeah, I just really love it. It's going really well.
And hearing all these travel stories regularly, these wild travel stories from other people, I'd love it if I could hear one of yours.
Oh, well, the interesting thing is I'm not I have lots of great travelers on the podcast, adventurers, explorers, people that have crossed, you know, gone down to the Arctic on a rowing boat, people have cycled all over the world. But I also have people like me, journalists and authors, who have not done all these incredible trips, but everyone's done something, you know, even going to Bognor for the day in your local area is a great travel story. So I haven't slung on a backpack and gone traveling around Nepal or anything for months, but I have managed to see the world in a series of shorter bursts of time and holidays and through my work. And I think that's one thing that I take away from travel, is that you don't have to have had the money. I couldn't afford to go traveling after university. So here's a travel for you. I want a travel story for you. I wanted to go traveling, and a lot of my friends did go traveling, but I couldn't afford it. My parents couldn't afford it. I had to think about starting work. So I had a boyfriend at the time, and we were living in Brighton, and we were like, he was a musician, and we said to each other, shall we try and earn the money here, working here in Brighton for the summer, to go traveling, or should we go to, I don't know, Amsterdam? So we'd had a couple of drinks, and we go, okay, heads Brighton, tails Amsterdam. And it came up as 12 Amsterdam, and tails Amsterdam. And we moved to Amsterdam the very next day. And all as we had was enough for 3 days accommodation and his PA system. So we were carrying speakers through the airport and his guitar. And on our third night, when we thought, oh God, we're going to have to go back home, we were in a bar in Leaders Plain. I forget how you pronounce it. There's lots of shushes in it, in the center of Amsterdam. And I bumped into a guy that I knew from my growing up in Spain. He was at the Swedish school and I was at the English school, and there we were in Holland. And he said, oh, I'll introduce you to my friends. And there were these two Swedish girls, and they said, come and live with us. So they like decamped from one room, slept in their bed together, and me and my then boyfriend slept in one of their other rooms. And we were there in Amsterdam saving to go traveling for the summer. We were there in Amsterdam for the summer, saving to go traveling. So I'd love to tell you we saved loads of money and then went off around the world, but we didn't. We ended up traveling down to Antwerp, where he had a friend. We ended up renting a studio there. We ended up saving no money and coming back miserable, not having gone traveling, splitting up, and having spent a year in Holland and Belgium. But it was an exciting year in many ways to look back, and it made a good story. I think that was it.
Well, that's certainly a travel story. I've never decided to go somewhere on the flip of a coin, so I might try that in the future. If you want to hear more about her adventures and also check out her podcast, go on to thebigtravelpodcast.com, and you can follow her on Twitter at thebigtravelpodcast or personally at LFND. My final guest for this month's podcast, and in fact the whole entire series, is videographer and documentary maker Itte Hossain. He opens up about how film for him was an escape, which is how he fell in love with the medium. He tells me about the hard graft he put in building himself up in the TV and film industry. He honestly shares his own experiences as a freelancer and tips to keep mentally healthy whilst freelancing. And he tells me all about his feature film made in the very height of lockdown. It's currently in a number of film festival submissions, so we might just see it on the big screen soon.
I'm delighted to be joined by videographer and video editor who produced over 700 videos, and you've been featured in the Tate Modern, and you've created a feature film in lockdown when many people were making banana bread. So Itte Hossain is joining me now. Hello, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. That's a great introduction. I appreciate it. It sounds quite mental when you say it out loud. 700 videos. I do not understand how that happened, but here we are.
So when did you notice you were interested in film? When did the passion start for you?
I think for me, I think it's a cliche, isn't it? Oh, I've known my whole life, but actually in a weird way, I probably have, because I started writing scripts when I was 13 years old. Most people were probably still outside playing football. I very much realized when I was about 7 or 8 that I was a little bit overweight. I'm better off just sitting down and writing stories. And then even though when I lost weight, I was like, I still enjoy this. I think films, they were an escape. I think I didn't have the greatest time at school. Always felt a bit of an outsider. And as I grew up, I realized that movies, TV shows, things that I would watch and escape, they literally were escape for me. It allowed me to enter a world that I could essentially create. And for me, I knew what made me happy was being in that world. And so I was like, well, I have to make this into a job. I have to turn it into a career somehow, no matter how many hurdles you have to go through. So for me, since I was a kid.
And there's loads of different storytelling skills there, because it's not only the writing, but it's the vision, then it's the filming, capturing that on camera, and then it's the editing as well. And then if there's additional music and sound effects, there's so many different layers to your craft.
Absolutely. Like I've always said it's one of the most versatile industries, because I always hear stories of people that will say, oh, I started as an edit assistant and then now I'm making a Hollywood feature film. And it's like, you hear all these stories, and actually there is a lot of sense to it. It's genuine, because we don't learn everything straight away. We have to take our time and actually, like, funnily enough, I was never actually into video, like filming wise, but now my day job is filming things. And that was because I was like, I want to be able to direct. And in order to direct, I need to learn the skills I'm going to be directing. So editing, filming, writing, pre-production, post-production, production. At one point I was a light boy. I was literally running around with lights, and I would literally people would come up to me and I'll go, "You got another bit of tape?" And I'll be like, "Yep, got my little tape in my belt." So I did all that, like as a runner, production assistant, researcher. I think pretty much on a film set, I'd pretty much done every job at some point in my life.
That's tough. That's really tough. People many times, all the runners say how many years they've got to build themselves up in that industry. I mean, do you ever see yourself potentially going into the future as a director?
I mean, absolutely. I think directing's always been something I've wanted to do. But, we all have our dream jobs, right? But in order to get to that dream job, you have to do the miles. I think you truly become a professional when you've done 10,000 hours. I think that's the saying they have. It is a saying of, like, especially in our industry, is like, if you accumulated 10,000 hours, you've made it in some form. Like, that's how you base it on, like, you've put in the graft. I don't think I'm quite there yet. I might be, I don't know, but it's definitely, it feels like 10,000 hours sometimes. But I think one thing I've learned is, if you want to get to something like that dream job, you have to do all the little bits around it, because what will happen is, when you get to that job finally, you'll appreciate the hard work that went into it. And also, I always have this thing of, like, I would love to be a director of a film where I've got all these runners and I can go up to them and say, it can happen. It can definitely happen. Your dreams can come true. You don't always have to be chasing around and illegally stopping traffic. And what other stuff did I do? I did some
You
mad
illegally
things.
stopped traffic.
It's probably not stuff you want to put on air, but at the same time, it doesn't matter anymore, because, this was years ago. They actually got me to wear a high vis and stop traffic, even though legally we were not meant to. So me and this other guy would be standing outside, and this was for days. We would do this days at a time. And like I said, I've done most jobs. I've brought 30 plus people on a set, tea and coffee. I've had to remember orders. I've had to order lunches. At one point I had to cook lunches. Like, it's insane. Like, but the thing is, I'm so grateful for doing all that, because it really makes you want what we're actually going for more, because you're like, I'm doing all this. It's got to happen. I have to make it happen now.
You've put in the groundwork and the hard work. Yeah, that's really impressive and really inspirational as well. And you've highlighted the range of varieties of different areas you've covered with your career. I mean, you've filmed at events like weddings, but corporate events as well in Paris, and gigs as well. I mean, how do they differ when it comes to your style? Do you have a set style with filming, and what's it like just varying in each one? Because some must be really fun and interesting and exciting, and others must not be.
I think in any job, you're always going to have something that you prefer over something else, right? Like, I'm sure event planners, they probably think, oh, I like these kind of events. Oh God, I've got to do this as well. Like, I'm sure, like anyone else, I'm sure you've done it. We've all done it. We look at our calendars and like, oh God, that again. So it's just like that. Like, but I think for me, especially when I was freelancing and I was completely, like, essentially doing everything on my own, in the sense of, like, equipment, everything, I was researching everything myself. I was learning new things a lot of the time on the job. Sometimes I would be underqualified, sometimes I'd be overqualified, but I'd always treat it the same, because I realized that regardless of how this goes, it's going to essentially be like that step to get better. Like, I look at stuff now that I did, like, I mean, we talk about weddings. I remember the first wedding I shot, most of it was overexposed. I look back on it and I think, they actually paid me for that rubbish? Like, and now, and like, and that's the point. That showed me growth. What's beautiful about doing video is, because I'm filming stuff, it's immortal. It's there. It's permanent now. It's a memory, literally a visual memory. So I can see in real time how much I've progressed. And, I mean, I'm probably still making mistakes now, but back then, the mistakes I was making, I'd be like, I wouldn't pay anyone to make the sort of mistakes I was making back then. But no, I think weddings, I think at the beginning I used to love doing weddings, but then after a while I realized there's the same story and narrative. Like, in the end of the day, they will just want you to get the kiss, and they want you to get the atmosphere. Some people want you to get people chomping down food, which I still don't understand to this day.
Yeah, that's a bit weird. Maybe the cake, but I wouldn't do the course.
I'm not even joking. I think I remember one request I had on a brief was, can you film to make sure these specific people like the food? And I was like, why don't you just ask them if they like the food? Why do I need to film?
Oh, that sounds like some family drama there, Gary.
I mean, yeah. I think weddings were fun because especially when they were like destination weddings, or they were weddings that are like in this bougie ass plaza in some random golf club or something. Sometimes they were boring, but a lot of them, they were fun. Events, a lot of them, yeah, no, I had my preferences. I used to love doing press launches. I used to love galleries. Sometimes you do find yourself, your morals get tested a bit, especially when you're like basically self-employed and you're having to say yes to whatever job you can get, because you need to pay the bills. So, but every opportunity, I'm grateful for every opportunity I've ever had, and my style doesn't change per se, but I'm very good at adapting to my environment. I think that's one thing I've learned is, if you want to be good at this, if you want to be consistent at this, you need to be prepared to adapt, because I know, like a lot of corporate jobs, they have their structure. They need things to be done a certain way. The reality is when you're in this environment, it's not always going to be like that. Like, no day is actually going to be the same. And whether that sounds good or not, it won't, because a lot of the time things aren't going to be in your control. It could be the smallest thing, like, oh, one camera's died, or it could be another thing like, oh, the person I'm interviewing is not shown up, or another thing, events practically cancelled. I've had that. I've been to an event and I've had it completely cancel on me on the day of. So you have to be prepared for anything.
I think that's important to thrive, definitely, and also to survive as a freelancer. You were talking before about the mistakes that you've made and being prepared. Do you have any tips? Because I know you did workshops before on videography. Do you have any tips for upcoming videographers? I mean, I remember you'd always have spare batteries in your bag, which always came in handy.
Yeah, I mean, spare batteries, charging things beforehand, extra memory cards. These are the technical things, but I think most importantly is just being prepared mentally, because I think the toughest part of what I do is if I allow things to overwhelm me, everything, I'm going to be playing catch up the whole way through. I've had days, I mean, I can use one example. I think the toughest day I've ever had of a job, it's not a runner job, believe it or not. I mean, if I want to bring up a runner job, like if there's anyone who's thinking of going through the runner route, it's fine. But I will say, you will realize just how low you are made to feel when you're in that position. Because I remember I did one where I think we were shooting like for 3 or 4 days straight, and I think it was in Notting Hill, and they had, so when you go into the garden, they had, and this place we basically rented out for this shoot, walked through, and then the gutters, my leg fell right through the gutter. I got stuck.
Oh my gosh.
Lifted my leg out, completely bruised. I can't walk. But I do remember they gave me an ice pack, and then an hour later made me go to the nearest, I think it was Leland, to pick up a bunch of bits of wood, ironically, to cover up the thing that I got injured in. And they got me to go and get it. And I was like, I could barely walk. And it was a good 25-minute walk. And it's long enough anyway, but like, it was a hot day in the middle of the summer. And also I couldn't walk. So, and I did. But I'm so grateful in a weird way for doing things like that, because it prepared me for those kind of days that I had once I was in charge of things. Once I was like, I had one shoot in Paris where we were filming. It was a horrible day because we were filming from 8 a.m. and then around 2 o'clock, I found that one of my lenses got stolen from the very venue we were in. So I was panicking about that while also trying to actually do my job. We finished at 5, had a 1-hour break, then had to shoot from 7 to 10. Then I had to take the footage I shot that day to make a day 1 highlight video that night. I didn't go to bed till 4 o'clock in the morning, but then to get up again at 7 o'clock. But I bring that up now because that's what you do. Like, you have to sometimes the reality is you're not going to have easy days all the time. Like, you would love to say, oh, this is an easy job, but it's only easy if you genuinely want to do it. And, with all those stresses you go through, it's only worth it when it's for something you want to do. And I've always known I wanted to be in this kind of industry. So if I have to do these late hours to prove a point, I'll do it, because if that's going to get me to that next job, or going to get me to that next place in my career, then so be it, right?
That stamina is insane, really impressive. And yeah, as you've highlighted, if you really love the job and if you really want to get into the industry, then you've got to sacrifice a lot to get there. And it's a journey and you'll get there in time. But yeah, that must have been a really exhausting day, especially as like mentally. How do you prepare for freelance life? Because now obviously you're doing a bit more freelance on the side, but before juggling those different film shoots, different clients, different styles must have been so exhausting.
It is exhausting. I think you know, we always say about like, oh, it's so good to have your own business and do this and that, but actually it's a long time before you can actually feel the value of that, like, because at the early stages you are basically, it's a weird thing because you think, oh, I'm self-employed, therefore I'm my own boss. But actually, in the early stages of your career, you actually have more bosses than a person who's doing a 9 to 5. A person who's doing a 9 to 5 has one job, one boss who they need to impress. You end up having to impress everyone because you call them clients, but actually they're the ones that are holding the key for you to get to that next job or to get that income, because they could just say, oh, the work wasn't good enough. Because at that, for temporary periods, you have a lot of different bosses, and it's tough. It's not easy because there are days where you just, you want to, no matter how much stress you have, there's going to be days when you don't feel like it. Like you want to do better, but you just can't. And the reality is especially when you're freelance, they don't cut it. So what you have to do is, I don't know, I think what worked for me was I would do the whole mindfulness stuff. I would do a lot of like self-help reading and, even take counseling sessions and stuff, because I think when you go freelance, a lot of your emotions come out more because you're chasing invoices, you're struggling, like the days you don't know when you're going to get work, there's days you don't know when you're going to get your next paycheck. All these things add up, and I think in a weird way going freelance was probably the best thing for me to grow up. So I would say one thing, if you do want to do it, know that it will definitely age you. Might be for the better, probably for the worse, but at the same time, it will definitely give you that maturity, like in that working world, because you won't have security. You will be fending for yourself a lot of the time. You'll be chasing a lot of people for a lot of things. You'll be made to feel useless at times. It's going to happen, and no matter how good you think you are, or one person says, one thing I learned, I guess this is the best advice I can give to someone going into freelance, is be prepared for negative feedback, because one day you could be like on top of the world, and like this client says, oh, you're amazing, but you're only as good as your last piece. And I found that I've had clients who couldn't stop praising me, and at the beginning when I started, I would be so excited by it, like, oh, thank you so much. Now any compliment, I treat the compliment just as I treat like constructive criticism, or I call it constructive criticism, but because everything is just a part of the journey. You're learning things. If anything, you probably want the constructive criticism, but I learned that over time, every positive feedback is just feedback. I'm not going to take it personally and be like, oh, it's just how I shouldn't take negative criticism as a bad thing, as like a personal thing, because it's not a personal attack. It's very much a thing. It's very much individual. Same with positive feedback. When we get positive feedback, we always go, oh, look how great I feel. And then when we get negative feedback, we take it personally. So it's like, the point is, it should be treated the same. You've done a good job. Well done. You did what you were paid to do. You've done a bad job. How can I improve?
That's a life lesson in itself. Not every day is going to be perfect, and don't take things so personally.
No.
So you highlighted your journey. This is a huge aspect of your journey. You created a feature film in lockdown in March last year, Self-Isolation Together. What inspired you to create this piece?
It's funny because we're talking about all this freelance stuff, and it kind of reminded me of why I started it, because I had lost all my clients. Like, it sounds all funny. It's funny now in retrospect, but it didn't feel funny at the time. Like most people, I'm sure there's a lot of people who probably have had it worse, not to mention pandemic and the virus and stuff. I somehow luckily have not caught it, but what I did catch was mental instability, a lot of mental health issues, in that we depend so much on our jobs, on our we define our characters based on what we do, and when you're not doing it, you lose that identity. So I think for me, that documentary was more therapy for me than anything else. I think I did it because, well, partly because I had a lot more time on my hands, but also because I needed to do something that I felt I had an attachment to, because I'm not getting paid for anything. So I might as well not get paid doing something I enjoy doing, rather than not get paid and just, make banana bread. For me personally, I'm a creative. I need I need my creative juices to be flowing. So I remember one time I was sat down with my housemate. I think we were watching one of Boris's many announcements, or whatever, his little speeches he would do for everyone addressing the nation. And I think it was the first one after he announced that we were going into lockdown. And he was talking about figures and this, that, and the other. And I was just thinking, we're hearing all these stuff about these people going through it, like all these politicians, but we're not actually hearing about what people are going through, because it's not just being like avoiding a virus and just being at home, stay at home, save the NHS. It's like, but what about people in the NHS? How are they suffering? Or then what about the family members? What about people that are in their house alone? Because I was lucky. I was living with two people. I had human interaction. Even when I was away from my family, I still had human interaction. And then I have friends who live on their own, literally on their own. When they're being told you can't even go outside, what are you doing? You're literally waking up in the morning. If you have work, you work. Doing a few Zoom chats, great. And then you have nothing. So I just thought it would be nice to meet people. Originally in the UK, my intention was just a few friends. I just thought, you know what? I was given an excuse. It was mostly just an excuse to catch up with people. That's all how I saw it. I was like, it might be a good idea. And I thought maybe I'll make something personal for people. Like just a fun thing of like, remember that a year ago or 2 years ago, like a time capsule. That was what I called it at the time. I was like, that would be fun. And then I think it was you and then a few other people were saying to me, why don't you just start? I've got a few people in this country. And then someone said, oh, I know some doctors. I know some nurses. I know some people actually working frontline. And I was like, yeah, cool. Why not? So I started meeting people virtually. And then I think somehow we ended up covering like 4 continents. It just got a bit weird. So it was 30 people by the end. And then I think at one point it was at 25. And I was like, you know what? I wonder if I can contact a few of like people that are appearing on like BBC, Sky News and stuff, and see if they might be interested. Because, they're all talking on Zoom. It's all the same, right? So I approached this guy who went viral on Channel 4 because he was an Irish teacher in Wuhan teaching English. And his video was #1 trending on YouTube in January 2020. Bear in mind, this is when China was in lockdown. The rest of the world wasn't even ready for this yet. And he was very much in the front line. He was showing the experiences we were having. Like there was footage of him going to the shops, wearing a mask and then covering his face with a scarf, wearing goggles, wearing a big hat, big coat, taking massive suitcases to get all the shopping, because the reality was that's what they were living. And I was looking at all that along with everyone else going, wow, that's quite mental. And then months later, I'm talking to this guy and we're talking about him at that moment and going, how is this any different? This is what I'm doing now. I'm going around with suitcases because you don't know if you're going to get the next product. Because in the beginning of this, we were all struggling. Shops were running out of toilet roll. I don't know why toilet roll was the thing I was running out. I spoke to him for a good few hours going through, because not only was he in Wuhan, he was actually one of the people that was quarantined in our first official COVID quarantine zone in Wirral. And then I decided, you know what? The clap for NHS is quite a thing, right? Let me see if I can speak to the lady who started that. And sure enough, again, a bit of sliding into DMs. We think sliding into DMs is all about dating, but actually it's great to build networks. Again, we had a great chat. She was a lovely Dutch lady, like so chill. Like she was so brutally honest as well. And it was so refreshing. But she was saying like, it's so funny that the whole point of this clapping thing was it was just meant to be that, like once a week, because we aren't seeing anyone physically. If we can just get outside of our door and be on the front porch or whatever and just see other people and just feel like we're a part of something again, because she was seeing it done around Europe. Like her friends back home were saying that this is being, that we're doing this. But actually, when I spoke to her, it was around the time when it started becoming a political stance. I was watching it back the other day just because I've like not seen it in a while. And I was thinking, it's so funny. Back then, we were so hopeful. And I'd like to think now that we're on the other side of it over a year later, maybe we're going to have that kind of optimism. But it was so funny. Even though we were all in isolation at the time, I think there was a lot of positive people. Maybe I just got lucky with the people I was speaking to, but there was a lot of people with very big hopes of like, I feel great. Like I'm excited. All the stuff I've neglected, I'm going to do. But I feel like because we've been in this for so long now, I don't know, like, are we still in that mood? Like 3, 4, 5, 6 lockdowns in, what are we still feeling that way? I don't know. And maybe I need to get in touch with all the people again. But at that time, for me, it was all about how am I going to deal with this? This is my way of basically like dealing with, like, that was my good 4 weeks of my first lockdown was just spent talking to different people. And it was actually some of the most memorable things I've ever done. Didn't get paid anything for it, but I got paid in an experience.
And you mentioned before, you know, maybe you should have a catch up with everyone. And it was weird when you were talking about the Irish guy in Wuhan. I got goosebumps because we're so used to the life now. We've normalized it. And thinking back to how it was back then was actually quite strange, powerful at the time. And so I do think I need to watch back the documentary and be taken to that time. But looking now where we are a year later, what was the experience like creating that documentary, but also being in that first lockdown and a year on? How are you finding, obviously doing well, putting it into festivals and, you know, you've got a stable job, but how mentally are you? And looking back in reflection, I guess.
It does feel surreal because now we've gotten used to it. We've normalized it. That's the human experience, right? We normalize things. We adapt. That's, I mean, I said it before. I think I said it somewhere once. The one great thing about us is that we are able to adapt. And, you know, if regardless of whether people are happy still being in this or not, the point is it should be a period to reflect. I'm more hopeful now. I do think there's a lot of people are going to appreciate their life now more because it was temporarily taken away from them. And I think, you know, I mean, I not to mention, obviously, can't forget people who passed away from the virus. You know, that is very much the thing. Like, I luckily didn't have any close family members who died, but I have a lot of family members who either caught it or have suffered long term from it. I've had some relatives who've got like their lungs have basically like their breathing has gotten worse. So I'm definitely like, I definitely understand the severity of all of this. And, you know, and I've heard people say, like a friend of mine from school, his mother died from it. And she was she was the same age as my mother. So it made me kind of think like that could have been me in that situation. It could have been me losing my mum. So like to go through all of that, I think a year later, like, I don't actually think we're ever going to be recovering from this. And, you know, I feel like, I hope we learn from this, but I do not think we're going to truly recover from this. I think we'll adapt. We are adapting. I think we'll go back to a normal, but to say we're going to have life that it was before, that would be very naive to say that. So I think the best thing I've gotten from this is learning to adapt and, you know, accepting the life you're given, because this shows us that things can just stop at any point. So we have to be prepared. We have to learn to appreciate those few moments we have with people we care about. So after this, learn to appreciate every moment.
Such an enlightening and powerful interview there with Itte. I feel his interview is the perfect way to end this series, which has been a roller coaster. Me personally, whilst chatting to incredibly inspirational people from each area, music, adventure and culture. If you want to follow Itte, please do check out his website, itteshad.com, and his Instagram account, which is itte_video, where you can find links to the documentary, and if you ask nicely, he may send you a link to watch it. That's it from me for the end of Series 2. I'm not sure when I'll be back, but if you want to keep up to date with inspirational content, feel free to follow me on socials at Vicky Carter. Probably doing something, most likely kicking ass. I'm Vicky Carter, and you keep kicking ass.